The Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a special edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you live on Power Talk. Please go to our website, powertalk.live, download our free app, and stream all of our live local programming, including Solomon on Blast, the Jim Parisi Show, and yours truly, the Jake Feinberg Show. We can't thank you enough for making this part of your day today. And as I traverse the musical landscape of our country and around the world, it is always an honor to bring in cats that are locking the groove and developing new rhythms, timeless rhythms that can carry on for future generations' understanding of how real music is made. And my next guest is a decorated bass player and a cat that I've wanted to talk to for some time. His main gig at this point is working in the band known as the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, cooking the groove with cats like Tony Leone and Neal Casal, who I've had a chance to talk to. And without further ado, Jeff Hill, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
How you doing, Jake? Thanks for having me.
It's great to talk to you, man. Can I just, were you getting off on cats like Wilton Felder and Chuck Rainey as bass players? There's an art.
Yeah, of course.
You talk about how you got exposed to them. Was it on records, or can you riff on that?
Well, I mean, with Chuck Rainey, I realized that he was playing on some of those Steely Dan records.
Right.
And I think he might have been on Peg and a few things like that, and they were just such hip bass lines, you know. I mean, and also the Aretha stuff. He was on a lot of early Aretha stuff as well, I believe. So. And that was from liner notes, you know. I would find on liner notes. I think at that point, a lot of those Aretha records had the players.
You're absolutely right. You're at the accompanist. Well, I guess specifically,
you know, because Stanley. I
yeah.
I think there was back before Stanley was a solo. Stanley Clarke was a solo bass player. He played a lot of fundamental roles on some of those old records as well.
What I was going to say is that I wanted to get your concept of the bass player, because I interviewed Miroslav Vitouas, and he said that basically people a lot of times give him or Stanley the credit for being, maybe Jocko, I don't want to leave Jocko out too, but sort of that, the individual voice of the bass, right? But actually he said that really started going back to the early 60s with Scotty LaFaro and Bill Evans.
Of course.
And
I mean, you can go further back to Slam Stewart if you want.
Well, shame on me, because my lineage kind of cut. I need to go deeper. Slam was definitely there. Even Lord Flea back in Hawaii playing the one-string bass. But what is your concept?
Or Jimmy Blanton, who played with Duke Ellington. I mean, that's not an individual voice on the bass. I mean, you could hear it loud and clear how distinctive his concept was. Yeah.
Can you talk about your evolution insofar as knowing the traditional role of the bass, and then ultimately how you, or maybe an opportunity or a band that you were in early on where you were actually you were actually part of the conversation?
Yeah, I mean, that's been developing throughout my years of playing. I go back and forth between playing really fundamental bass playing. I guess it really depends on the music, whether it's songwriter music or whether there's improv or free improvisation where you just play, you just play with people and see what happens. So if I'm playing in a traditional singer-songwriter gig or a folk gig or a country gig, I'm not gonna. I tend to try to play the idiom, opposed to generally stand out as a voice.
Like the Little Feat gig. Can you talk about Gradney? What is that about? What is that like?
Well, that was amazing to actually learn those songs. So I've been a Little Feat fan since I was in high school, but I don't remember really checking it out as deeply as I did for this gig. And I didn't realize how difficult the music was to try to play in a band, because there's a lot of odd time, odd bars here and there, and their live records are different from their solo records. So I don't know where the evolution for the band, like how they decided when, okay, now there's not going to be a 3/4 bar there anymore. There's going to be and they're all playing so freely through it, especially Gradney's just like, he's completely all over it, and the music, they just had internalized that music so well, they could just all mess with it. So.
Did you guys, when you were getting ready for the gig, did you, I think their live shows, like the Grateful Dead, I look at their albums, I never really, I love the tunes, but their live stuff is what I get off on. Did you guys do more, did you guys work on more of the live?
We tended, we were kind of defaulting to the live stuff as much as possible. I think because we didn't have charts or anything, we just all learned music and then got together one day and played it all through. Everybody had kind of listened to different versions, so we kind of made the decision, hey, maybe we should try to stick to the live versions, because otherwise everybody's going to have a different concept of what the song is. So.
What is the? No, I dig it because their studio tracks are like 3.5, 4 minutes long, but then you listen to a show from Ebbets Field from 1974, and they're like stretching it way out, and the dynamics too. The dynamics are just incredible in that band. And I just was it a fulfilling? Can you talk about how that concept even came together, and to the peeps in the world, why you wanted to do it?
Yeah. Well, Jesse Lauder put it together. I don't know if you know who he is. He's kind of a producer, music. He's a singer as well. But I think he put it together just to pay tribute to the band and have something fun to do. Tony Leone had asked me to do it. I was like, well, I thought that would be super fun. So. It was a great experience to get deeper into that music.
Well, I got a game on this program called Name That Voice. I want you to not only name the voice, but I also want you to listen to the context of it, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay?
Okay.
Up, and I'll finish my answer to your question with another memory I had, and it came to me so many years later. When I first left home, and I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I was playing in this band, and I lived in a barn. I had just left home, and I had absolutely no money. I was stealing food from a Total Station, ramen noodles,
right,
and cans of soup. I'd put them into my jacket. Literally, the time-honored tradition of starving musicians. But I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I lived very close to the campus of the University of Michigan. And every day I would walk around that campus, because there was a lot of shops and restaurants and record stores around the campus. So I would be walking side by side, almost arm in arm, with kids that were my exact same age, and they were all going to college, and I wasn't. I was living in a freezing barn and starving and stealing food just so I could play guitar in a rock and roll band. And never once did it occur to me that I should be doing what they were doing. I never, ever doubted myself, and I never thought, well, maybe I should try to go to college like they are because it's a smarter move. It never dawned on me until at least 15 years later, when, I grew up and had some hindsight and realized that that's how badly I wanted to do this. And that's how much it meant to me. And it was really a matter of life or death back then.
All right, Mr. Jeff Hill, who is that?
How could I not remember that? Know that voice? I hear it every day.
Yeah.
Mr. Neal Casal.
Neal Casal, and just to give some context to it, there's a great chanter, a Hindu chanter, Krishna Das, and he had really struggled with drugs and really his own psychology and really getting out of his own way for years. I mean, we're going back to a guy who was with Ram Dass and Maharaji basically gave him whatever. He was a deeply spiritual character, but you know, he was near despair, and the whole point of it was in 1994 he had this kind of cathartic experience where he got a message from Maharaji to start chanting, and now he is where he is now. And the point is that as a non-musician, as a journalist, when I see bands out there or musicians, you as a patron of the music, you often think of the musician wanting to seek some sort of bliss state. And what Krishna Das said was, and what I played it for Neal, was that he said, I don't chant to get bliss. I chant so I don't fucking die. Okay? And so when I played that for Neal, Neal obviously went on this classic, very long-winded 10-minute answer, which I love. But he took the drama needle down, but at the end, he told the story about Ann Arbor, which is maybe a story you have or haven't heard. But I want Jeff Hill to talk to the audience about a time. I mean, if you didn't play music spiritually, would you die?
I would, yeah. That's a tough question. I would, I could be in a position where I couldn't play music, but it could be a moment away if something terrible happens. And I don't know that answer. You know, I have two kids, so my perspective is different now that I have two kids. That the music is for me and for my being, but it's also for them, and it's also for and I'm here for them as well. So I don't think of death in the same way that I may have 5 years ago. But I do remember the reason I became a musician, and it was because I was inspired by jazz musicians, mostly because it was a lifelong pursuit. You know, they played the music and improved and were seeking until they died. There was no like arriving at perfection. It was a constant journey. So you never get there. Death is the end of the journey.
I dig, man.
And so that's what turned me on to it. And I there's no end to the inspiration. So that was what really turned me onto it. So like when people ask me if I had a lot of people in my family maybe say, hey, maybe you should have something to fall back on or do something else with your learn something else that you could use if you need money or whatever. So my answer was always like, I don't need something to fall back on because this is what I'm going to do. There was no other option but success.
How old are you?
I'm 47 years old.
Okay, so I'm 39, and I also have two children. But I wanted to say, what you're describing is a calling. You had a calling for the music,
yes,
and it was deep inside. And so, I mean, were you ever at a point? It didn't have to be Casal stealing ramen noodles out of a Total station, but was there a point where it was like, it was so you were not living your life by society's rules, and you were scuffling, and you still stayed with it because the calling was so fierce?
I don't think I've ever had a time where I was struggling like that. Mainly because I'm a bass player. I think
what does that mean? Is that in demand? You're in demand a lot?
I think bass players, like there was always a gig.
Yeah, it didn't matter if you could play. If it was polka music, whatever, you just do it.
Yeah, whatever I had, and I also used the system a little bit. I went to college for music, and I got offered a stipend, a TA position at Northern Illinois University. Wow. When I graduated from college, and it was basically, I was in Boston at the time. I basically got in a car with all my belongings and drove to DeKalb, Illinois.
Well, no, I want to be clear. When I was pursuing a degree as a teacher of the visually impaired, one of the schools I was looking at was Northern Illinois. So I didn't ever get out there, but that's corn country. That's north. That's
yeah.
out.
I didn't realize. I looked on a map, and at that time there was no internet. It was like there was maps. I looked on a map. It was a map and a book, and I looked in and I saw that Chicago looked kind of close.
Right.
And so then I drove out there and I got to Chicago, and I kept driving. And I got on the highway to go past Chicago, and I kept driving, and there was nothing. It's just like it was flat, and you couldn't see anything for miles. There was like a tree out in the distance and a little farm about 4 or 5 miles away on your left, and the same thing on the right. And I drove another 45 miles, and they said there was an exit sign that said DeKalb, Illinois, and I still didn't see anything. I was like, where am I?
You're just terrified. Terrifying experience, really.
I got there, and I had all my stuff in the car, and I got to the, I rented, I went on, I think I rented an apartment sight unseen. And I got to this place, and it was terrible, and I had to bail out and just drive around looking for an apartment. And so then I got there, and it was it was a TA position, and I also had to play in the big band. So I taught the jazz ensembles, and I played in the big band. I also went to school. The school part I didn't do so well with because I was so busy with the other things.
Was it more like the theory bit? Just like the actual application of like sitting in a classroom?
I just had to take a lot of classes and a lot of, and there was the schoolwork. There was a lot of schoolwork, but I also was so busy with the TA work and the big band, and then I was getting gigs in Chicago, and I was driving 65 miles to Chicago a couple of days a week, and so it was a really busy year, super fulfilling. The big band was great, and I actually got to play with Clark Terry that year and Tito Puente.
Get out of
in
here!
In that big band, it was great. It was a touring.
Yeah,
it was a touring big band.
I gotta get this straight. Were you playing upright bass?
I was. Yeah.
This is badass. So was it because that was I remember talking to John Hurt. John I love. I'm dear friends with him, and he used to play in that bassy big band. But you really had to learn how to. Did you have a big band experience prior to that, or did you really learn how to swing?
I didn't play in a lot of big bands in Boston, but when I got to the Chicago area, I played in that big band, and because I was it was kind of a ringer position. They would hire a bass player, TA, so that they would get a really good bass player to be in the big band. It was a scouting process to get a bass player for that big band. So the big band would tour quite a bit. We would do in that year we did 3 or 4 tours, and we'd go all through the Midwest doing the high schools and doing clinics and playing these concerts. And then we would do a week at the Jazz Showcase every year. And so that year we did a week at the Jazz Showcase with Clark Terry. And Dizzy Gillespie was one of the first people to start doing the program. With the program director was Ron Modell, a really great band leader, and I'm not sure if he's still running the program, but I think he might have retired actually. But he
is that where
it was just
I want to go back because you said something so powerful before. But is that where you first learned about this eternal search by the Jazzers?
No, that was long before that.
Can we go back to this eternal search? Because I want to know. I mean, was that through records? Was that through seeing people live? Because that to me, so many of these cats gave their. I mean, music in our culture had a totally different significance, but that was absolutely like paramount individuality, and you'd take it to your grave. So, but I mean, you already were on. You were cooking the groove with Clark and those cat and Tito. But when did it dawn on you, or when did it first inspire you that you realized the jazz life was that eternal burn for individuality and significance?
Well, I think it was probably sometime towards the end of high school, and where I really decided that this is what I want to pursue, and I had another fortunate thing happen to me. It was just a fluke thing. Where I went to high school, in the town I went to high school, there was the principal at the high school, called me in. She said, "You know what? I know that you're been playing bass, and I just wanted to let you know that there's a really famous bass player that lives in this town, and I'm going to write him a letter on your behalf and see if he can meet with you." And his name is Gary Carr. I don't know if you.
I don't know that name. Wait, I'm sorry. What town was this?
This was actually a small town in northern Connecticut called Granby, Connecticut.
Sure.
It's right on the border of Massachusetts.
Was it like I-84 kind of area?
No, it's more 91. It's like the foothills of the Berkshires, basically.
I'm a Boston University guy, so I was always around that area. But anyway, so Gary Carr.
So Gary Carr is the preeminent classical bass soloist in the world.
Wow.
He actually Kuzovitsky's widow actually entrusted his bass with when he passed away with Gary Carr, because there was something about their hand being identical, or there was a cast of his hand and they had identical hands, and so she gave him this bass, and he teaches all over the world. He's just an amazing voice on the bass. Technically, he could do anything. He's got the most beautiful sound. He bows up and down like you couldn't believe. He also has, like, really, when he plays, he has a sense of humor, and it's like a show. It's fun. You should check it out if you get a chance.
I would love to. Yeah, no, you got to have the entertainment. Yeah, go ahead. So he lived in my town. So she set up a meeting. I met with him. I was clear at that point. I wasn't even really playing upright bass so much. There was an upright bass at the school that I was kind of tuning up and trying to play, and I brought it to him to check it out, and he said, "Oh, take this, detune the strings immediately. You got to take it. The thing's gonna blow up," because it didn't have a sound post in it. So if you just put the strings to tension with no sound post, eventually the bridge will bust through the top and break the bass. So he's like, "You got to," So he basically got me started. He was a little bit too advanced for me to start taking lessons from him. Right.
So he hooked me up with one of his students at Hart School of Music in Hartford, and so I started learning.
Isn't that where Leone? Wait, hold on. Is that where Leone went too?
Yeah. It's so funny. Leone and I were passing each other in probably the streets, but we had never met.
Unbelievable. So you went there at the same time, but never. It was just like,
we're the same
strangers
grade.
in the night.
Well, I didn't go to Hart. I just was like going to lessons at Hart.
Oh, that's so
and
great. That's so great.
And my bass teacher was Dave Santoro, who great jazz bass player from Hartford. He taught at the Hartford Conservatory, and he also had a program, a high school performing arts program that Tony Leone attended. And at the time, Dave said, "Hey, you need to come to the high school with me," and we and there was already a kid from my school going to the high school, and my school wouldn't pay for both of us to go. So I didn't get to go to the performing arts high school, but I still took the lessons with Dave, and was learning about Paul Chambers and Ray Brown and stuff like that. Anyway, I ended up doing yard work for Gary Carr. I never.
You were just trying to get your ears to grow, listening to him practice.
I just wanted to like hang out, and learn some music, and I ended up raking leaves and cutting trees down and doing all this stuff for him. I don't know how that ended up. I don't know how that I ended up being his yard worker. But at the time he was paying me $18 an hour in 1985 or something like that, 86. So I was happy to have the job. And then, you know, when I never, and he would give me free tickets to concerts if I wanted to go, so I would go see him. But that was the extent of the interaction musically with Gary Carr, except for him sending me to one of his teachers. But but when did it? I guess you said it's still sticking with me. It's this eternal search. Was that the Carr the Enlightenment, or was it just was? I mean, what I'm trying to get at is like they were just. I mean, these cats. But what was the moment? What was the moment that I you know, I think it was like learning about John Coltrane and Bird, and just realizing that these guys, you know, at the time I wasn't aware of that it was kind of the drug problem that may have caused their early death. But I was attracted to the passion of the pursuit.
They were clear. You listened to those records, and they were there searching. They were just searching desperately.
Yeah, and I just and listening to Jimmy Garrison play the bass, it was so urgent. The way they played, that attracted me to it. And then I would see. It may have just been a perception from my point of view of making it out to be more than it was, you know. But it did have like a.
Yeah, that's the Jake Feinberg. I mean, that's what I've been doing for 6 years is perception. Okay, so you don't even worry about that. That's really what the dream is. This question popped into my. But before we move on, going back to Chicago, did you ever play like the Green Mill? I mean, were you?
Yeah, I played the Green Mill every Saturday night.
Wow.
From 12:30 to 5 a.m.
So there were still the dawn sessions when Hill was.
Yeah, and there's the band that I was doing. It's called the Sabretooth Jazz Quintet.
Yeah.
Is still playing the gig from 12:30 to 5 every Saturday night.
Get out!
Same
They're
band.
still. Are they serving alcohol till 5?
Yeah.
Wow, because I mean, I thought the film that's so invigorating to hear. Go ahead, though.
So the gig is also a jam session too. So basically, we would play, the band would play like a set at 12:30, an hour set, and then after that, it would kind of be opened up for people to come and sit in, and different people. You know, I might get a break for, a couple songs, and but during the quintet set, we would play original songs. We also did Grateful Dead covers, actually. I think that was early on.
That's fantastic.
This was in the
it
early
out.
90s. We were doing Cassidy. We were doing
this is great.
China Doll. We were doing lots of cool songs.
Like in the same tempos as the Dead would, like the
No, they were different arrangements. They were like,
this is unbelievable, man. God, China Doll.
I mean, you should check it out.
The
They're probably still doing it. They're probably still doing those songs because Pat Mallinger, the saxophone player, is a super Deadhead. He's always been into them. So I was doing that gig. I was also playing during the jam session at the Bop Shop around that same time, but until it closed, which was on Division. It was and that was with Lynn Holiday, who's since passed. But he was hosting that jam session. And I would, I played with Von Freeman and Jody Christian over there at the
Are you
Bop Shop
kidding
as
me?
well.
Are you really?
Yeah, the thing that was great about Chicago, this is in the early '90s,
Nuts.
is that there was a lot of older guys to play with. A lot of some of them passed away or since, but there just was a real integration of playing young cats playing with older cats, and guys coming in and sitting in, and guys coming in with weird horns and double horns and playing at the sessions, and it was like it was cool. That's what and there was such a solid swing, like grooving tradition there.
Well, I mean, you're playing with like the original cats from like the Delmark label, like Von Freeman and freaking, Jody Christian. I mean, the other thing, I mean, could you talk? Do you believe that? Because clearly with Jeff Hill, the lineage. One of the L's on my show is lineage, and I've talked to enough peeps to know that there has been a break in the chain somewhere. But the chain was still very strong when you were there. You get to play with Cert because you got a chance to play with many different human beings, and every human being, especially drummers, have a heartbeat, and that's where the rhythm comes from. Can you talk about how important that was playing with because you got cats today, less venues, less gigs, whatever, no touring circuit, so to speak, really jazz, I mean, in this country. I mean, can you talk about how important it was for you to play with all different types of drummers, because ultimately everybody had their own time feel?
I mean, that was the most important lesson I had. My time in Chicago, that was what it was all about. It was like playing the feel. The feel there was you had to swing. If you weren't swinging, you weren't working.
Can you give an example of like of a time when like, just who you were, like a time when you were on the bandstand when it was just the guy had such an unorthodox feel. I remember talking to Famadou Don Moy. I'm not sure if you ever played with the AACM cats or anything, but it was like literally he was on drums for this gig, and the piano player wouldn't even acknowledge him for like 6 months after the gig was going 6 months. It was just, I mean, can you talk about a specific example of like you're learning a time feel with different cats?
Well, I mean, I think my particular way of playing, I would try to just go with the common denominator of whatever drummer I was playing with.
Right.
So if there was a drummer that was, like there's a great drummer, Dana Hall, that plays in Chicago, and he has a very specific, aggressive time feel, and it's like you either get on board with that or you're like down the river. You got to get out. You're
like
behind
you're way behind.
You got to get on.
Yeah, right.
But then there's other cats that are just laying it back. Rusty Jones or something like that who actually passed away recently too.
Absolutely, yeah.
But and then there's Robert Shy. There's Mike Reyna. There were so many great drummers in that town. And Ted Sirota, who's on that gig, and they all have a different time feel. But the common denominator was that it had to swing, and the responsibility for its swinging isn't that there's only one time feel that swings. It's that the two people have to come to some type of middle ground to make that happen. Or I'm saying two because the drummer and the bass in that.
And that requires, and what I'm saying is it requires listening. And
it requires listening. It actually requires letting go.
Right.
Sometimes too, letting go of what you think is right, or or your ego, or and maybe that's why I've been successful at playing with lots of different drummers, because I'm willing to. I'm not trying to fight anybody. I'm just trying to make music. So that was a learning experience. I also did a lot of gigs that it was just piano and bass or guitar and bass. So I really learned how to play. I learned how to play, having my own internal time feel when I'm playing with any other person to hold it together. Um, I was lucky enough to befriend a great bass player named Kelly Sill from Chicago, and I actually first approached him to take lessons from him, and we ended up just having long talks. And I don't remember ever really having a lesson with him, but we hung out a lot, and then he started subbing gigs out to me. And so I would play. He had a gig at the Hotel Nico with his wife Kelly Brand every Saturday, and and he would sub it out to me often, and I'd play. Sometimes it would be just duo with Kelly, or Ron Dewar would play saxophone sometimes, and that was a great learning experience, because you get in there and you have to make the music move just without there being a drummer.
Exactly.
And that was almost more important than learning to play with a drummer.
Were you ever? This is so important.
Being the drummer.
This is important because I just did 2 interviews with Julian Priester, and a lot of people don't know he played with Muddy Waters in Chicago. Speaking of Chicago, a lot of the blues cats, and his dad was a preacher, so he's playing spirituals, and then ultimately Sun Ra. Now, it wasn't like the circular breathing. Well, I don't know where it was at, but it was mid-50s Sun Ra. He got a chance to play with Sun Ra, and really it was liberating, because I'm giving you the Cliff Notes paraphrase, but he basically was saying that Sun Ra allowed, Julian was saying you had to have your own, as a bone player, you had to have your own internal time on the trombone. You had to keep time, because it allowed freed the rhythm section up to actually play melodically. And and that's, as it relates to the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, I've actually never seen you guys live. I've heard some of the studio stuff, but do you get an opportunity? I'm not saying it's Sun Ra, but I'm saying, do you get a chance? Yeah. Do you and Leone specifically feel like you're able to play the tune, play melodically, like where everybody's got their own internal time feel, so that they're not relying on the drummer and the bass player to keep time?
Yeah, absolutely. In this band, everybody has their own, is all responsible for the time feel, and I feel like everybody's has a good like if I go away for a minute, nothing's going to fall apart.
Right.
Or if anybody decides to check out another realm of time just to juxtapose it with what's happening, it's there's never gonna be a freak out in this band.
Well, no, but do they actually? Let me ask you: do they go there with you?
Yeah, sometimes.
Because that is the Miles Davis thing. Yeah, I love it.
Sometimes a move that somebody makes will bring us to another place. It's mostly in the open jam sections. Obviously, we have songs, so it's as much as it's a jam band, it's also a song band. We have great songwriters and melodies, so it's for a good part of it we stick to that script. But I think when it's time for us to be open, there's a lot of freedom there. And if somebody wants to go in a direction, I think everybody's happy to let that happen and try to go with it.
I mean, does Chris talk about that Miles Davis philosophy, that there are no wrong notes, that the idea is that if somebody plays something different, he encourages you to go with it? Or, I mean, because I get the second set is more open, the more exploratory.
I would, Chris doesn't talk about that per se, but it's more about living it. Like in order to allow us everybody to allow themselves the freedom, it's like sometimes it's better to just. I think it's more of a non-judgment thing. He doesn't go around saying, "Hey, I didn't like that thing that you did on that jam. Maybe you could try." He's just we finished the gig, and if we all land on our feet, we're like, "Hey, that was fun. Let's do it again tomorrow night." It's like that's more the attitude, and a lot of it is owed to Chris's openness to to like having the music grow. We all want it to happen, so it's like the best way to let something grow is sometimes to leave it alone.
You mean leave it alone in a verbal sense? I mean, as opposed to being...
Yeah, not try to impose your will on. I mean, you can't just you water a plant and you can't just sit there and watch it grow. You got to let the...
Well, you can't overwater it too,
You don't want to overwater either, yeah. So I think, since I've been in the band, there has been not a lot of words about the music. It's more about it's more just like getting together at sound checks and gigs and playing and using our ears and trying to be open to it.
What's the philosophy of the Chris Robinson Brotherhood? I love it because it's a page out of the some of the classic improvisational rock bands. But what is the R word in the Chris Robinson Brotherhood? Rehearsal. I mean, is rehearsal a vogue thing, or is it kind of seems to me like you're just, well, if it sounds good, let's just get up on the, let's do sound check. Let's hit this. If we land on our feet, we'll do it the next night. But what about, because I mean, we're in, I guess I want to paint this in a macro sense in that my generation, Gen X or younger, it's just, there's so much micromanaging now. There's so much formulaic stuff or comping. You got to sound like this or that. And it's like, to me, less is more. So I wanted you to just, can you talk about the R word and how that's viewed?
Well, we don't, we've had very few rehearsals. I mean, obviously I had to learn the whole body of music and then go on tour. So I had to learn the music and then, but we would just, we would start basically, we had a rehearsal before the first gig I played with them. That was probably the longest rehearsal we had. And now most of the rehearsing is done at sound check. So if there's a song that I'm not familiar with or the band hasn't played in a while, we'll definitely play that at a sound check. And that's the rehearsal.
Right.
That's really the extent of rehearsal. The rehearsal is, sometimes we talk about transitions between songs. I think that's because we segue a lot between songs to find new ways of getting to other songs, and the jams are in between the songs.
Exactly.
And so then we find a way to get to, by putting every set list is different, so we find the spaces where we could jam and get into the other songs.
Do you have logical, like where are you literally segueing different songs every single set, or have you found like these? Are there examples of tunes that you are always, just using the Grateful Dead as an example, Estimated Eyes or Scarlet Fire? Is there that kind of?
There's a couple that the regular.
Which ones are those?
Off the top of my head, I would say we do. I'm spacing on the names right now, but
that's all right.
We've been off for a couple.
It's sorry. It's just music. It's all music. There's no the name.
Yeah. But it's mainly like, well, we have like if the connecting songs, a song that ends in G and then somehow getting to A for the next song, and so there's journeys to be made to get to the next song. As far as example, I'm spacing.
Well, you can think about it. I want to read. I just I wanted to get your take on this. So I had a chance to interview Alan Toussaint before he passed away, and one of the quotes he said was, and I just want you to think about this and then relate it to the rhythm section of Chris Robinson. He said, even the tuning of the instrument has changed music. You need a meter to get things done, when before you used to read your heart. Some of the stuff that you found out in the tuning is what made you, you. After a while, we begin to look at a needle. I'm not saying it would be good to play out of tune, but out of tune isn't always out of tune. Once you begin to operate on this very thin straight line and quote unquote, now we're ready to go, You're ready to go because the meter dictated you're ready to go. It is correct that it is totally in tune, but if you're not careful, your life of music can become that way. And this is the most important thing. He said, when it became a thin rule and the tempos never moved, and it was more important to stay in tempo, sometimes you have to speed up a little bit here or there. I'm not saying it's better or worse. I'm just saying it happened. Can you talk about you and Leone, being the fact that you both are street scholars, you both have worked with masters, how you guys don't adhere to staying in the same tempo all the time, and also the idea of how you, being out of tune is not always out of tune. I just want you to riff on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, this last record we made, there isn't a click track in sight. We didn't even have that happen at all.
Thank God.
And I'm not a huge fan of click tracks, and I'm not a huge fan of judging whether something, sometimes the rhythm police come out and it's like, hey, I think we're speeding up at that spot, and like, I don't care. But if you're speeding up and it feels good,
right,
because it's making the music move, then that's fine. There's no rule saying that if the music speeds up, it's bad.
That's just what it is. Thank you for the cathartic. If it's speed, the rhythm police come out. Who are first of all, are the rhythm police like peeps or like? I mean, where are those police come? Because
sometimes the rhythm police could be yourself. It's about judgment. If you start judging yourself and second guessing yourself, then you're already out of the music. So when you're playing, it's like if you're getting excited and everybody's getting excited and it starts to speed up, oh well. Should you stop being excited? And then what do you do when you realize it's sped up? You freak out and say, "Oh, well, this sucks. We're speeding up."
Because if it feels good, you just cook, man.
Yeah.
How did you and Leone learn to make so that you became so that you were able to shift tempos and, like you said, not fall apart or it became a mess? I mean, can you talk about that part? I just came back from a week. I was actually up there for one day, but it was Billy Cobham's Art of the Rhythm section, and it was just so cool to see Billy and Dean Brown and these guys work together, to make the music feel good and to have fun doing it. And the rhythm I mean, can you talk about the evolution when you joined the band of how you and Leone learned to say, oh, if it speeds up, it speeds up, but we're having a ball, so let's do it? Because I just think it's invigorating.
There wasn't. I don't know how Tony and I do that. Maybe because we're both, our beginnings were so close, even though we didn't connect at that time.
It's unbelievable.
I started playing with him maybe 6-7 years ago. We were both on a Shooter Jennings session.
Sure.
So that's how we started playing with Shooter Jennings. We made a couple records with him and toured for about a year. And that's how we started. He and I really started playing together, and it always felt great to play with him. So I don't remember us having to talk about it then. So there's not really a lot. It's not a conscious thing. I think that it's that trust thing I was talking about before, about where you have to come up with a common denominator between, and you try to make it feel as good as possible.
What about the idea of out of tune? What Toussaint was saying about out of tune isn't really out of tune. The idea that you're predicating your sound on something that says you're in tune. But what he was trying to say, Levon Helm playing the mandolin, or Leone tuning his drums, or Keltner or Gadd tuning his drums, that's what makes you. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the sound? How you became? This is the important point. How did you first begin to enjoy the sound that was coming out of your bass?
Well, my first bass, my first real bass I had. I don't know why I chose to do this. I was at a music store and I saw this really cool black bass, and it had and the fingerboard was rosewood, and it didn't have any frets on it. And I picked it up and I started playing. It was a jazz bass, a Fender jazz bass, and it felt so cool to me.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't trying to play it like a fretless, like I wasn't even into Jocko at that time. I was just trying to play the notes in tune.
Sure.
And I thought it was cool that I could also slide around and stuff. And so that actually helped me with intonation, and it helped me when I switched over to the upright bass, because there was no frets on it.
Right.
And so in tune, you could tune the 4 strings on your bass, but if all the rest of the tunes all the rest of the notes are a sliding scale, you know, the intonation has to be in your ear.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you can tune what you tune, if you tune the bass or not. You're responsible for it, for the intonation. But it's all, you know, but it's such a subjective thing, what's in tune. You know, some people have an aversion to Jackie McLean because technically he plays on the sharper side of the note. But that's what his sound is. That's what gives that. Sometimes when you play a little bit of sharp, there's the vibrations change. That's all it is vibration, the music. So if you're vibrating it a little higher, that gives it a certain energy and a certain sound, and that's what Jackie McLean liked to do. That was his sound. So, you know, you know, there's some young guys will be like, "Hey man, that guy, he always played sharp. I don't like, you know, he mustn't have been very good." Well, that's furthest thing from the truth. So it is subjective.
Is there I mean, McLean was a teacher of Leone's, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
And was there somebody that you, on your trip, either in the bass or, you know, who had their own vibe and their own, I don't know, edge, and you really bought into it? I mean, it could have been the bass, or it could have been Woody Shaw. Was there anybody out there that where it was subjective for you, that you really got off on it, even though it wasn't, you know, it wasn't out of the book?
Well, I mean, there's so many people that have influenced me over the course of this, you know. But I remember really getting into Charlie Hayden for a while,
right.
And just realizing that, hey, you know, it's all about his sound, because he wasn't a technical player. It was all about the emotion that was coming through each note that he played. So, you know, realizing, so that's where I started to really focus in on like the sound. How do I get a better sound? How do I get that sound on the upright bass? And the upright bass was exciting because it wasn't, the sound wasn't, you weren't the amplifier wasn't part of the sound. I mean, yes, when you're playing gigs, but also like you were responsible to get a sound just in a room by yourself.
Unamplified, totally.
Unamplified.
Totally,
you know?
totally. I mean, this is important. I mean, do you feel in your own mind like where is the Brotherhood? Where is there still? I mean, you guys are growing still. I mean, is there?
Yeah, of course.
Sonically, do you feel like you guys? Is there stuff you still want to add sonically? I'm not saying add extra instrumentation, but where you're currently at, do you have, like, in Jeff Hill's mind, how do you want to grow sonically still?
I'm not, you know, I joined a band about a little over a year ago, and I also was not the original bass player, so I came in where I needed to respect what was there.
Yeah.
And then also try to add my own sound to it. And so I'm still on that journey of trying to figure out what is the sound and where is it going. So that's yet to be discovered. We did a gig in Oregon a couple weeks ago, and I brought the bass that I brought to the very first gig, and which ended up, it was before I was in the band. It's actually the gig that got me the gig. The gig that got me the gig. It was like an audition gig, basically.
What was it? So I'm sorry. The audition was what gig though?
It was a gig in Vail. It was like it was like a outdoor show and concert in Vail. It was very cold, I remember.
So I just want to be clear. I want to be clear though. This was like an audition with the band. Your first gig with them.
My first gig it wasn't like, I didn't have like a formal audition. It was like, hey, come out and do this gig.
Get on the bandstand, right? Oh, that's that. Yeah. So it was very cold, yeah.
And it was a very cold day. I remember it was like outdoors.
Hands were freezing, yeah.
And I have a 1974 Gibson Ripper bass, and so I brought that out, and I thought it would be a good fit, and I brought it out, and then since then it fell by the wayside, and I've been playing like several other basses on tour, and just trying to find what bass would be the right bass, and then I brought it to the gig at the Oregon County Country Fair a couple weeks ago, and I think I'm bringing it back because it sounded so good. It was so fun to play. So.
Wait, hold on. You found another Gibson Ripper, or what did you find?
No, it's the same bass. I just didn't bring it on the road for most of the year.
Wow.
And so now I'm going to bring it back for this next tour and see how it goes. But it does have kind of a unique sound. It's really cool.
Can you just explain to the audience? You were more poetic than I'm going to be, but you said your point of view, I guess, has on the music has changed. You didn't say you're playing your music for your kids, but there's another another layer and meaning for the music now that you have kids. Can you unpack that?
Well, I mean, I think that your question was whether if I couldn't play music,
right.
I would die.
Right. Spiritually, so not in a casket.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
And I think, there would be a death involved.
Yeah.
If I couldn't play music, it would, and but something would have to fill that space. For the sake of my family, so it's hard to. I mean, that's a hard thing to even know until you're up against that. But again, what was your question?
Well, no, I mean, I think
about
you went off on talking about the meaning of music now and how it's changed now that you have kids. That's what I thought I picked up on, was that there was an emphasis on when you play now that it is. It seemed like there was an emphasis on not playing for your kids, and I don't want to say, but there was something in there that I wanted you to expound on.
And maybe it's legacy, maybe it's I don't know. I mean, you have kids. You know, your perspective does change. You start thinking about things that you didn't think of before when you have kids.
Yeah, well, I mean, for me, it's like almost become like, it sounds weird to say this, but I've almost like sought less responsibility and started to dream more. Like I've had, my 11-year-old and a 5-year-old, so like this is legacy. My show is what it's become and how it's growing.
Yeah, I see.
And knowing that, but also knowing that the significance of what I'm doing could reveal itself long after I'm gone, and I'm okay with that too. But legacy is a very big deal, and my kids just they inspired me. I guess, have they inspired you on to continue to grow on the bandstand?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, originally I was wary of taking a gig where I'd be away from my family a lot, and I realized, and in a lot of ways, my partner Jenna Krause reminded me, that I need to do this. I need to go out and play music and be happy.
Wow.
Because that's what's going to be important as an example for my children.
Well, let's be clear. I mean, I just got off the phone with Mal Waldron's daughter, Mala, and when she had kids, she went off and became a legal secretary and fell into a deep depression because she wasn't playing music. And she had to raise her kids, obviously. But it comes to the point what your partner saying is, Jeff, you need to do this for your soul so that you can come home and and have that infectious thing for your kids. Because if you're cutting meat at a deli or you're whatever, you're not going to be Jeff Hill.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I feel like I'm not happy because I'm not doing what I want to do, it's not going to be good for anybody. So,
not a good scene there. No, I'm with you, man. I mean, this is, and the nice thing is at least this isn't a pay to play gig. You're the Robinson Brotherhood is a sustainable thing, and that's an important thing in this time, especially with music because it's changed.
Of course, yeah. I mean, it was, and it was also for me. It was I really wanted to be part of a band where I could develop a sound. It wasn't just going in and playing somebody else's thing. I wanted that was very intriguing to me, and I'm super happy to be playing on this gig.
Can you say that one more time? Go ahead, please.
Like it was an opportunity to be myself.
Exactly.
Joining this band, opposed to maybe joining being in a band that I had to play exactly what somebody else wanted.
Well, no, that's my final question for you in set one, Mr. Hill, is because I had a chance to go up and do a Facebook Live interview with Pat Martino a couple weeks ago at the MIM and
cool.
the Musical Instrument Museum, which I highly encourage you guys to come and play at. It's maybe a little bit too wine and cheese for the CRB, but I don't know. The thing is, I want you to talk because you just nailed it. This idea, can you break down Jeff Hill's evolution in becoming an artist and not just a craftsman? Because what you just said before was you're hired, like you said, as a bass player, you can always get gigs. And you come in and you're working under somebody else's concepts. You're essentially a craftsman. As opposed to being an artist, which you get an opportunity to express yourself. Can you talk about that line, that divide, and how you got to the artistic side and not just being a craftsman?
Well, I think early on, separating the two between like having a gig where you make. Sometimes I would do a gig and that would be for money, and sometimes I would get together with people and just play music. I especially remember the early days in New York. I was there, and I got there in '96, and most of my time was spent just going to people's houses and jamming. I don't know if it still happens. Probably it might happen with younger cats now, but I mean, I my week was filled up with going to John McNeil's house or someone and jamming in his living room, or there's just like people getting together in Park Slope.
In Brooklyn, yeah, there was like that was like the equivalent loft scene of the mid '60s. It was great.
Yeah, it was a cool scene, and so there was no real agenda other than to like meet people and see make some music, play with people, and so then there was a bit of separation between like, oh, I got to do this gig, this wedding gig or something, and then I also, but there was always the pursuit of the other. So I never really thought of when that actually happened. I think I've always been on that path of trying to have my own sound.
And it's still, it's true because I think some people aren't even aware. It's a fascinating thing because I know like someone like Pat. I mean, he is like he will just pound into you or me about this thing about relentlessly pursuing, just cherishing the moment, and especially in music, and always being an artist, because otherwise you're relegated to just being a craftsman. And he hates, I mean, and I think that that's the cool thing, without actually having interviewed Chris yet, is that aside from all the sort of beautiful sort of sociological things that he's pushing out, as far as the venues you play and the tours you go on and the way you cut your records, and he's put together a band of artists, guys that could be craftsmen and have been, but are truly have always had a calling to be individualists and artists. And I think that is
absolutely
right. I mean, I think that that's probably that's why this will sustain and become timeless in some ways. You know, I hope you stay in I didn't even know you were only in the band for a little over a year. For some reason, I thought you were in for a lot longer. But
no, it's a recent thing for me. So yeah, I mean, I hope that's the way. I mean, it feels that way. That's the way this is going to continue, and hopefully it'll go on for many years. So.
Well, I just want to tell you, I'm going to do my best to get up to Vegas on December 8th, and I would love to get into the green room with you and do set 2, maybe on Facebook Live together. I'd love to meet you in person, as with the rest of the band.
That would be great. Love that.
I had a ball with you, man, and keep it up, man. You're doing your thing, and you're on your path, and I'll just be transcribing some of these stories and blasting them out as usual on Facebook and things like that. So
all right.
It was really,
Thanks,
really an honor, man. Thank you so much.
All right. Look forward to meeting you, man.
Later on, man.
Okay.
Peace. Already a heavy morning here on the Jake Feinberg Show. We had a opportunity to hang again with Mala Waldron, the great pianist, and just cooked the groove for an hour with really amazing bass player, all sorts of musics, long career, now finds himself in the Chris Robinson Brotherhood, Jeff Hill. Thanks to Kevin Calabro and the Royal Potato Family. We'll be back in 1 hour with Norm Harris. Until then,